The .NET Core podcast is supported by our listeners who have become patrons. To see a full list of the patrons, or to join them, head over to .NETCore.show/patrons. Hello everyone and welcome to the .NET Core Podcast, an award-winning podcast where we reach into the core of the .NET technology stack and with the help of the .NET community present you with the information that you need in order to grok the many moving parts of one of the biggest cross-platform multi-application frameworks on the planet. I am your host, Jamie GaProgMan Taylor. In this episode I talked with Evan Wolbach about his experiences with building cross-platform video games with Unity and .NET, including his Outbreak series of video games. We also discussed the extremely low barrier to entry for both .NET 6 and Unity, and how it's entirely possible to use Unity to build many different types of applications, all with almost no .NET knowledge required. Along the way, we discussed the fact that you can use Unity to create more than video games, from VR and AR applications to in-game cutscenes, but also including art pieces. An example of this is when a member of Corridor Crew used it to create a Bob Ross painting during one of their Bob Ross challenges. Check your podcatcher for a link to that. So let's sit back, open up a terminal, type in .NET New Podcast, and let the show begin. So thank you ever so much, Evan, for agreeing to be on the show. It's a great pleasure to be reconnected with you. I'll talk about what the reconnected means for the listeners in a moment, but thank you ever so much and welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Excellent. For those of you who don't know, I produce another show called Waffling Tailors, and we've had a chat with Evan on Waffling Tailors before, where we talked about the Outbreak Endless Nightmares video game, which was just then coming out, and there's a whole series of them. I will put a link into the description of this podcast, so definitely go check that out, because we talk about the video games themselves, which are, I'll let Evan give you a brief overview of those really quickly in a moment, but my terrible description of them, and I'm sorry, Evan, is that the latest one is like a third-person survival horror roguelike video game. So if those words are lighting up parts of your brain, go check the game out.
Absolutely, yeah, that's a perfect description of it. And yeah, and the whole series is routed in those classic '90s survival horror tropes and gameplay motifs and things like that. So if you like fixed cameras, you like inventory management, you like not having enough ammo, and you like kind of cheesy stories and stuff like that, I think you'll find a lot to love across the series. There's 6 games total. Endless Nightmares is the most recent one to come out. And we're going to have more content for Endless Nightmares coming out in the next couple of months. And there's plenty more stuff on the horizon that I can't get into right now. But you're going to be hearing a lot more about the series in the next 6 months.
So one of the reasons I've invited you on, and you've so graciously given us your time, is that the games themselves, you have some experience using Unity to build them. And this is something that we discussed on Waffling Tailors. Didn't go into a huge amount of detail because that's more about the playing of video games. So I was wondering today if you wouldn't mind, we could talk about sort of Unity and how you've gone ahead and built those games.
Absolutely. I'd love to discuss it.
But I guess first, if you wouldn't mind, could you give the listeners a bit of a brief overview, like the elevator pitch of Evan, and so that we know where you've come from and what you've been working on recently and stuff?
Absolutely. So I'm a professional software engineer. I've been in the industry now for quite a number of years. Formerly, I was a VP Director Engineering at an S&P 400 company. And now I run a indie video game studio that develops and publishes video games, both my own series, the Outbreak series, and that also offers publishing and development services for other indie developers who want to bring their games to console and PC platforms that are developing with Unity as well. And I have a long history on the development side. I originally started with C and C++. Then over the years, I've used everything from C#, JavaScript, all those fun languages, Java. Then just I really, at the end of the day, I've kind of used everything either professionally or on my own in my own projects. So I've kind of been everywhere and done pretty much everything now.
What I feel like you're describing there is like the Polyglot Programmer. You mentioned a lot of C family languages, but hey, how do I put it? After you deal with syntax, the most difficult bit is typing it in, right?
Absolutely, and I mean I mean the one thing that I will say about languages that have been coming into their own over the last 15 years is that once you have the fundamentals of computer science down, of data structures and algorithms, and you can program well in one language, a lot of these other languages coming out, you can get up and running in them in hours usually and start creating stuff. And the barrier to entry really has just been dropping precipitously, really over the last decade plus. And it's not like 25 years ago when you'd pick up like a C or C++ book and be looking at like the Windows examples in those large tomes that they used to sell at all the bookstores and everything, and it seemed so overwhelming. And now you can just grab something right off the net and get going in a couple hours and build your own simple game or application or really anything you want. It's computer programming has never been more approachable, and that's awesome.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I agree with you there. Some of the stuff that's coming out with the latest version of C Sharp. I think C Sharp 9.NET 6, the sort of minimal APIs, the global using statements. Let's reduce all of that cruft, all of that barrier to entry. I remember having to teach people. When I was teaching people .NET in the early days, it was like, okay, right, yeah, you've got to put these using statements. I won't tell you what they are. And then you've got to put a namespace. Don't worry about that. And then there's a class. Yep, don't worry. We'll talk about classes in a minute. Then there's a public static void main. Yep, okay. And then there's curly. And now you can do console.writeline. My name is, and then your name. That's cool.
Absolutely.
98% of what you've just typed is useless to you because it doesn't actually teach you anything yet, So yep. I completely agree with lowering that barrier to entry and making it easier for folks to get into this, because the more people who can take those ideas and sort of digitize them, the better it will be, right? We'll have more voices, we'll have more opinions, we'll have more discussion. It'll be wonderful.
Absolutely. And the other great thing that's happening too is that even if you don't have like I my degree is in computer science. I come from the old school world where we had like operating systems courses in C and MIPS and all that stuff that we came up in. And having that foundation is very useful when you're a professional software engineer and you're building stuff from the ground up. But what's cool is that people who do not have that background, who didn't come from that intense level of study or schooling, can take these modern languages like JavaScript and TypeScript and C# and stuff like that. And you can just build stuff now, and you're going to learn a couple, topics and some content along the way. But you can actually build something without knowing all of the fundamentals. And I think that lowering that barrier of approachability helps get people interested because they spend more time doing and seeing what they can build. And then that in turn will get them excited, especially you see this in like high school and middle school and stuff like that, that they'll see that they can build cool stuff. So now they're actually getting really interested in going to computer science. And over the last couple of years, I've had worked on several projects with getting folks in those age groups excited about a career in computer science. And we're not telling people about all these complicated stuff about pointers or Windows APIs or building apps from scratch. Instead, the conversations are just like, let's build something fun that you can see and play with. And then they want to learn more. So it's a really exciting time for the industry.
Oh, absolutely. I feel like well put together SDKs, libraries, and frameworks are kind of like playing with Legos. You take this chunk that does TCP/IP and throw that into, well, maybe not even TCP/IP. It'll be HTTP, right? Because you don't even need to think, what is TCP/IP? You don't need to know it. You just need to know HTTP, right? So right. You do HTTP client.get, and you can get a web page. Done, right? All of the wiring up is taken care of for you. And not in that you don't have to learn it, but it's like, hey, you want to talk to an API, here is a class or a thing that you can use to talk to it. Don't worry about it. You can build your own if you want, but hey, we've built one for you,
Yeah. And honestly, not spending time reinventing the wheel, because when I look at a lot of the earlier projects I did, like building my own game engines and stuff like that, which was now over 20 years ago, I was working on stuff like that, just kind of seeing how do I get graphics rendering to the screen? How do I do 3D rendering? How do I handle input and stuff like that? Like, there's no reason why you should be wasting your time building that stuff from scratch. You're likely not going to build it as well as a battle-tested library or API that's been out there for a couple of years that a major company's building. And you're also not selling the fact that you got graphics to render on the screen or you got your input to actually work on that. What you're building is at the end of the day is a product that builds on top of those foundations that can do something interesting or can fulfill a new need or a game or something like that. And that's really what you're selling at the end of the day. So, like earlier in my career, I thought, oh, it was really important to be able to build all that stuff from scratch. I thought that's what real engineering was. And at this point in my career, I'm like, no, why would I waste my time doing that? I want to build something fun and new, and that in turn becomes the product that gets sold, and that's how you support yourself. So, it's it's just that the industry is just, and it's such an exciting place right now.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there's something that I feel I need to tell juniors a lot of, not all the time, but a lot of the time, and that is the boss doesn't care how you did it as long as you do it, right? If it means you pull in a library, you pull in a NuGet package, you pull in an npm package, you pull in a gem, a Python from
Yep.
or whatever, it doesn't matter. They don't care how you did it, just that you did it. To use a really bad analogy, Kirk never asks Scott how he fixed the thing. He just wants him to fix the thing so they can get out of trouble. It doesn't matter.
Absolutely. And I mean, on that point, an important thing is I work with students too who are coming out of college and going to their first software engineering careers. And that's a topic that, like, when you're in an academic environment, a lot of it's study and theory and things like that. And that's the thing that I find with students is the hardest thing to get across to them is that, no, when you're in the workforce, obviously you need to be interested in your work. You need to be learning and building cool stuff. That's important to keep you motivated. But at the end of the day, you're there to build a product, to ship a product, to sell a product, to make money. And if you're not interested in that path of building products and making money, you can go into academia, you can go study, you can go do that stuff. But when you go to a company, to work as a software engineer, that's what you're doing. You're not trying to write the most perfect line of code. You're trying to write good code within a appropriate timeline that can be sold and that your customers are happy with and meets their requirements. And that's something that I spend a lot of time talking to people about, is just helping them understand that that's really what a career in software engineering is.
Absolutely. You see, you mentioned earlier on that you had spent some time building your own game engine, and you've recently pivoted to using Unity and the similar sort of tooling. So let's talk about that, right? Apart from the why am I spending all of my time building a game engine that may only survive one or two games? Let's not really talk about that, but let's talk about the pivoting aspect, right? What was it that made you pivot to Unity and similar technologies for building those games?
So it's funny. My journey to arriving at Unity actually started quite a few years before I actually started Unity. I was working in the Xbox 360. They had an indie developer program for the Xbox 360 where you could use your existing console and actually run code on it and develop using some .NET libraries and some other graphics frameworks and stuff that Microsoft built to run specifically on the Xbox 360. And there was like a creators program. This must have been back in like 2008, 2007, somewhere in that ballpark. You paid a small fee and you started working with it. And prior to me working on like my Xbox 360 game, I had been writing game engines myself in C and C++ and doing everything from scratch with that. And when I started moving over to the Microsoft environment and working on the Xbox 360, I realized all this stuff that I would spend months on building, it's already provided for me, and it runs better than pretty much anything that I could write, and it's still malleable enough that I can change it over to do the things that I need. And that experience, then I started looking into things like Microsoft Silverlight, which was, I think, big around probably around 2009 to 2012, somewhere in that window. And that used C#, that used a lot of .NET stuff. It was really actually a really fun little web. It was kind of like a web and desktop hybrid tool set. And that kind of furthered my experience with that, where I just spent more of my time actually building something fun. And then I started getting really interested in looking into, okay, so what does Unreal Engine look like? What does Unity look like? And it's when I started investigating those and I played around with Unity, I realized, wow, this is like that stuff I was doing on Xbox 360, but now it's like on steroids. And now it's completely cross-platform. And then the stuff that I build in there, now I can ship it on console, I can ship it on PC. The porting work is not gargantuan. I'm spending time building something that's actually interesting and fun to do instead of just the setup. And that's how I got to Unity. And Unity, is just such a life-changing environment for me to work in, because you can do anything in Unity. I mean, you can do anything in Unreal Engine, but Unity, the barrier to entry is just so small. Anybody can pick it up and play with, and it's It's known for games, but you can build any type of application in Unity. It's just a phenomenal tool set.
Yeah, totally. So I haven't had any practical experience myself with Unity, but I do like to watch people being creative with it. Right. One of the things that I like to do if I get like 20 minutes, not very often I get time to myself, but when I get like 20 minutes of just me time, I'll probably I hit YouTube and I look for people using this technology or people using that technology, and I happened upon a video by bunch of very, very talented VFX artists called the Corridor Crew. And what they did, it was phenomenal. They did a real time Bob Ross challenge. So they're watching a Bob Ross show and watching him create this painting, and they have to recreate it in real time with the tool of their choice. So there's someone using Cinema 4D, there's someone using an iPad, there's all sorts of different tools. And there's one guy called Sam builds the entire scene in Unity and then turns it into a game before the episode of the Bob Ross show. I think is it called The Joy of Painting? I only know it as the Bob Ross show, right? Before the end of the episode of the Bob Ross show, The Joy of Painting, he's made like a small island to run around, and there's characters to interact with. They don't do anything, but they are there, right? And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, wow, you can throw that together that quickly, and it's amazing, right?
And it's funny that you bring that up, because that's a really great example of something that I think when people think of Unity, they think of video games, and they don't think of just 3D animation or like film or things like that, or even just doing cool stuff with graphics in a non-game setting. And that's something that's really awesome about it. We were talking before the show, I have young children, and a lot of what we watch now is like those cartoons it's kind of like mass-produced 3D animation. I watch these cartoons where like there's a character playing like on a train driving down some tracks, and there's grassy hills, and it's very simple. It's everything's like shapes, and they're all bright colors. There's not a ton of detail in the scene, but it still looks cool, and it keeps the kids' attention. It keeps my attention as an adult. And what I do there when I'm sitting there watching that stuff is I think about, okay, if I had to build this in Unity, how would I do it? And the cool thing is it's trivial. It's trivial to make those hills, to make a little train go across the tracks and spray smoke into the air and steam into the air. And I've never actually looked into how those shows are produced, but I would not be surprised if there's some stuff on these streaming services that maybe is actually being built in Unity, just because it's probably trivial to do so. And honestly, it's probably a heck of a lot easier than working in some advanced animation suite where you need to have a huge render farm to render each image and build a video out of it. Whereas Unity can probably do it in real time at that graphics level, and that's just something I think about a lot. And it's just a testament to how versatile something like Unity is.
Yeah, one of the other videos, I'll put some links into the show notes if folks are interested, but one of the other videos that I've watched by the Corridor Crew is they talk about The Mandalorian, which is, the Disney Plus TV show, and parts of that are done with Unity in real time. So folks are walking around like a green screen area, and they've got, a bunch of machines with some NVIDIA 3080s or whatever sitting there actually rendering the 3D images in real time as the actors and actresses are interacting with the scene, which is just amazing. I mean, I think most of it is just previs. So it's like, here's what the 3D object will look like when our artists get, 6 months to work on it, but like,
of course,
gives the director a vision of what that scene could look like, right?
And if you look at NVIDIA's press releases, Unity's press releases over the last couple of years, I think for me, I started noticing it really around like Unity 2017, which was a couple of years ago. They've been pushing very hard on like graphics parity with the high end Unreal Engine stuff. Unity actually, it's usually like once a year, I think I've been seeing stuff, if not a little faster than that. They produce these gorgeous real-time tech demos made in Unity to show off all the cool graphics technologies and techniques they're introducing into Unity. And they basically produce like real-time film shorts, stuff that looks like the quality that you'd see in a show like The Mandalorian. And I think kind of what you're saying there is a testament to that direction that Unity is partially going in, and their success that they're finding so far is because the very high-end Unity stuff, it is gorgeous. And, I'm sure Unreal Engine probably still has a little bit of an edge if you're at this super, super high end. But the ground that they've covered in the last couple of years is phenomenal. And we're starting to see that in the actual game space now, where I think, and I think this was a very unfair thing to be saying, but if you remember like 5, 6 years ago, there was almost maybe a little bit of a stigma about Unity projects. There was always like talk that, oh, they always kind of look the same, or they have the same defects, or it's like, oh, I can tell just by looking at this it was produced in Unity. And as a developer, I think that's very unfair and really mean to the folks working on that stuff, because a lot of effort does go into it, and it's not just as simple as hitting an export button and saying I've got a game. But I've noticed that kind of general chatter has really died down in the last 2 years, and I don't feel like that I really hear that anymore. And when you play a Unity game on console, where the Unity logo doesn't pop up, I'm sure folks that played some Unity stuff on there that they probably thought was Unreal Engine, and it's just coming along so very well, and it's such an exciting platform for those reasons.
Oh, absolutely. I think I've lost count of the number of times in the last 2 years where I've fired up a game and I've seen the Unity logo somewhere in one of those splash screens or little loading screens, and it's amazing to know that all right, it's not all .NET, but there's .NET capability in there as well, and
Yep.
that, like you say, once you've done the hard part for you, which is create the game, make it engrossing, make it good to look at, or create the 3D scene, or create the frame or whatever. The difficult part that the tooling then does, presumably, is just going, right, I'll take this and I will format it however it needs to be formatted, encapsulate it in some container or whatever, so that it can be, side-loaded onto a Nintendo Switch or loaded onto a PlayStation or something. Because that's the crazy thing to me, is there is one tool to rule them all, right?
Yeah, and I definitely want to be super clear, and obviously we're not going to get too deep into the console side of things for obvious reasons, for proprietary technology and stuff. But I do also want to be very fair to the developers, of which I'm one of them, that Unity does a lot of that heavy lifting for you in getting the general executable and everything into the state that it needs to be able to run on a different platform. And I do not want to downplay the amount of time that saves an engineer like me. The fact that it can export and build and do that almost out of the box in some cases is absolutely phenomenal. But there is, still definitely a lot of engineering work that happens on the game dev or the developer side of it to basically connect all the little pieces together to kind of form the last bit that you need for everything to kind of work nice together. Unity kind of gets you 90% of the way down that marathon, and then you're left there with the last 10% to kind of handle on your own. But that last 10% then is probably taking you months instead of years for doing like a port to a console version or something like that. And that kind of technology and that kind of time saving for engineers like myself is the only reason why we can make games and actually have multi-platform releases. To talk about my most recent title, Outbreak Endless Nightmares, that was the first title that I released on virtually every major console platform and Steam at the same time, virtually worldwide. And I was only able to do that because Unity has that ability to be so cross-platform friendly. I still put months of work into writing reusable code to do that extra 10% of the gap there, but it would have been years otherwise. And I just want to make sure both Unity gets its due, but also that it's acknowledged that it is not just as simple as hitting an export button, and the developers are putting in their work as well on that too. Because I think that I do still hear kind of like misconceptions on the net where people think it is just as simple as saying, hey, export that to Nintendo Switch. And it's like, kind of, but no,
Sure. I mean, it requires those standard sort of software engineering practices of, like you say,
Yep.
Let's encapsulate this code, let's create something that's reusable. Let's, if I desperately need to do something that is very specific to a platform, maybe I could do an if-def or something, some kind of check to make sure that this code loads in and runs on that platform, or maybe I could pull in a library. I don't know. Like I said, I have no experience with it, right?
Well, you're spot on.
Okay. So we've sort of hinted at the fact that Unity is, you can use it for all sorts of things, right? You could do it for creating a 3D scene to make an image out of. I know that you can use it to create games. I get the feeling that in-game cutscenes are usually not drop out of the game, load some other app to play it, and then come back to the game, right? That would be a waste of time. So in-game cutscenes, I guess, must be in Unity as well. But what about other things? So I know that in the past we've talked to a few people about VR, and one of the folks that we talked to had said, "Hey, I've been doing VR is totally a thing that you can do in Unity. Have you any experience with doing that?"
Yes. So, a couple of years back, I participated in a hackathon with a good friend of mine at the time who I was working with. And we did an augmented reality application that was not a game, using the Microsoft HoloLens V1 dev kit in Unity. And it was very, very cool to be able to build that 3D space and to build things like kind of like you can imagine like a GPS tracking algorithm for the inside of a building. Like, let's say you wanted to know where the bathroom was from where you were. You could strap on the HoloLens, and one of the things that we worked on was building something to actually show you a waypoint so that you could walk all the way over to the bathroom or any other location you wanted to, just by saying, "Hey, where's the bathroom?" or "Hey, where's the printer?" or something like that. And and that's just another great example of Unity as a tool that's not producing games but can produce real life applications that have real value. Things like you can export out to HoloLens. You can export out to obviously the major VR headsets from Valve and HTC and all those other folks as well from there. And I know that there's Unity software out there or software that was written and built using Unity for things that are like medical procedures and stuff like that. There's GPS stuff out there. But there's just it's kind of another good example that the thing that you may strap on your VR headset for that's not a game, you may not know it, but that very well may be built and running in a Unity environment at the end of the day, and that's what's really exciting about it.
That's pretty cool. So it was kind of a leading question just because I know of a project that is ongoing that allows friends who have maybe social anxiety or can't really go into large populated areas. We're not going to talk about the current situation, but things that are happening in the world that are preventing people from going to places where they would usually be surrounded by a lot of people. So there is a company that I know of who are building out VR applications with Unity where you can sort of replicate that walking around an office or walking around a shopping center without many people around, just to, if you want that experience of, hey, I want to go to the shopping center or to the mall or something, but I don't want to have to be surrounded by thousands of people. Well, guess what? We can make a in quotes video game where you could just walk around whichever mall is near to your house or whatever.
Absolutely.
You can have virtual meetings in them as well. So, there's all these wonderful applications that things like Unity are helping to build, right?
And think about it. If you didn't have a tool chain that lets you just kind of get up and running and just focus on the content of what you're building for that, and you had to figure out the basis of how to create an augmented reality or virtual reality application, like that barrier is just absurd if you had to start from scratch with that. But you have these APIs built by HTC, by Valve, by all Oculus and Facebook and all those other folks. You have the hardware. You have this toolkit that integrates it all very nicely. And if you ask me, if you and I were to sit down right now and say, let's build a demo of that app to let you walk around in a crowded place, I bet you and I could have a proof of concept running very well. That would be probably cross-portable to most VR headsets. We could probably get that up and running in about 8 hours. And I mean, that's the power of a tool like Unity and the power of having all these standardized APIs for these hardware and software experiences out there. And another testament to when I talk to newer engineers and folks entering the industry about why it's important to be okay with importing libraries and not building everything from scratch yourself. It's the power that you inherit. You're standing on the shoulders of giants, and you can just get up and running in 8 hours. Versus if you and I had to engineer a VR headset and list of APIs and figure out all the math for that and everything from scratch, I've found years, if not more than years, to just get to a proof of concept. It's just incredible.
Oh, absolutely. And like you said, if we were building everything from scratch and we were targeting, say, the Steam headset, I can't remember what the Valve one is called, but the Valve VR headset, right? And then somebody walks in and goes, But Evan, I've got HTC Vive. then we have to spend some research time figuring out how do we port that over, right? Whereas
Yep.
because we would be using something like Unity, all right, it's not just a file export, but there's the amount of time, like you were saying, it drops from months down to perhaps an afternoon.
Exactly. And I mean, the argument there is, okay, well, that HTC headset that's different from the other one we were looking at, well, that's got standard APIs you can use, but you're still sitting there like, yeah, okay, so even if you give me the APIs for that headset, we're still probably looking at days, if not weeks. But Unity already integrated all that nicely for you, and it is as simple in some ways as maybe a couple hours of work than hitting export for that, and it's just so powerful. And I also think too, just the rate that we're seeing the evolution of technology in VR and AR and all these different areas, I think is due in fact that just these barriers are gone now, and that a student can buy a $300 Windows certified headset or whatever the certification is for AR or VR on Windows, and just get up and running instead of having to shell out tens of thousands of dollars or $100,000 for dev kit. It's just driving the whole industry forward so quickly, and it's awesome.
Oh, absolutely. Being in the future is the best.
and we're not even in the future. Imagine what's 50 years down the road. I mean, it feels like we're in the future, but our grandkids will look back at us and say, "What were you guys doing?" Like,
yeah, they'd be like, "You had to put a headset on."
Yeah, that's what it's going to be like. It just wasn't in your glasses. It just wasn't. Signals weren't getting sent into your eyes or something. It sounds like so much work to wear a headset.
Yeah, right. So let's say I'm interested in building something with Unity, right? I've got some .NET background. I've got maybe a little bit of C++ if I need it. I've got some assets. I've got some textures. I've got all of those things. And now I'm sitting here wondering, oh gosh, now I have to remember 3D maths, right? I've got to relearn algebra. Is that the case? Or is it just a case of, you can figure it out because there's menus and pointers and it'll just write the code for you? It's difficult to say, I guess, right?
The answer is, and I'm sure you're expecting this is the answer is, it depends. And Unity provides you a lot of standardized math libraries right out of the box. So like you're not doing all the mathematical calculations from scratch on a piece of paper or anything and trying to figure it out. They've provided the tools for you to do the math fairly easily, as long as you have a background and understand like concepts like vectors and matrices and things like that, and kind of how 3D space works. There is some assumption that you kind of have some knowledge of that, but they're not asking you to be a deep domain expert on that to be able to build stuff. And that's really, if you're working in like the scripting language, if you're just writing like C# and Unity, you can get at all that math directly and do it all yourself there. The cool thing about Unity, though, is that they put a lot of effort into making sure that the visual editor experience, kind of like the what you see is what you get editor, can do a tremendous amount on its own. They provide standardized scripts and tools for common physics, like for making something bouncy, for handling gravity, for move. Like if you want to just have a character that can move around and animate simply, they give you out of the box tools that you can edit to your heart's content and get something going. So for you, like let's just say you've never used Unity, you probably have a little bit of a programming background, and you sit down and you've got some cool models and stuff, and you want to make a little playable thing. You're going to be able to do a lot of that work, a lot of the basic foundation for that without writing a single line of code. Just by dragging your assets into Unity, using a lot of the pre-prepared physics and controllers and stuff for that, using the pre-prepared input handlers, things like that don't require writing a single line of code. And that's exciting. And then when you get that basic setup going and you have kind of like your proof of concept there, well, then you're just going to start looking into, well, how do I have custom animations for my character? How do I have custom input? How do I have things like that? And that's kind of the power of Unity, is that you gently get introduced to each of those topics as you try to solve one. You have a working prototype, and then you're going to kind of work on it piece by piece until everything does or looks like what it is. And that's when you're going to dig into the documentation. That's when you're probably writing a little bit of code or modifying code that they've provided for you. But there's a tremendous amount you can build. You can build a whole game in many different genres in Unity without writing a single line of code. And, something like that would have been impossible 15 years ago, which is incredible.
That really is incredible. Because one of the things I was going to ask is like, so you mentioned documentation and you mentioned being able to use a lot of the sort of WYSIWYG drag and drop, drag your asset in your 3D model, drag I don't know, maybe an animation file in and just set some parameters. And hey, it will move. It may not be perfect, but it will move, right?
Yep.
Which, like you say, it takes you from that, you wake up one morning and go, I'm going to write a game, right? And in the old days, it was, okay, so I'll start with drawing triangles on screen, and build up from there. Whereas right now, like you say, you can go, I'm going to write a game. I'm going to open Unity and I'm going to futz around for 3 or 4 hours. And guess what? I've got something, right?
Yep. And that's the power of it, is you've got something, right? Because I mean, you think about it like where you and I started with, like, okay, we're gonna get the OpenGL libraries. We're gonna draw some triangles on a screen, and after 8 hours, we've got some basic primitives on the screen. We've got some probably very basic broken input handling on there, and not a whole lot of anything. But with Unity, in that 8 hours, you probably have prototyped out your entire gameplay loop, and you can play it. It might be squares dancing around on the screen, but you have physics, you have all the input working. It looks kind of like in your mind's eye what you can envision the gameplay looking like, and that's a huge motivator to keep going because you already have something, and then it's just refinement from there at the end of the day.
Oh, totally, totally. And I suppose you don't have to worry so much about, oh, well, this person is on a PC but using a Dvorak keyboard. If you've gone down the route of writing your own game engine, you've probably hard-coded the WSAD keys to be movement, right? And on a Dvorak keyboard, that doesn't look like how, WSAD aren't where you think they would be.
Right, and I don't use this part of Unity, obviously, because I have my own like controller configuration built directly into my games. But historically, like, I know that, like, even if you could literally like tick a box in Unity that said, hey, when you boot the game, pop up a controller configuration and a keyboard configurator, and literally like if all you needed was something simple like that, it was literally like a tick box, and you could just tick, and it would be there when you start the app. And then that's kind of an example of, okay, you can get a proof of concept. Then when you're ready for your commercial product, you can integrate controller remapping directly as part of the game inside the application, stuff like that.
That's it. It's all sounding like it's getting me to the boss doesn't care how you done it, but you've done it. It's sounding like that.
Precisely, and that's what it is. And look, I mean, I basically make my livelihood producing indie games using Unity. And the fact that as a solo indie developer, I've produced a series of 6 games with more on the way that are available on virtually all console platforms, available in Steam. And I'm able to manage that workload and able to continue to create new products and handle my technical debt on my own, I think is a testament to how successful Unity has been in building that environment, because it allows a one-man show like me to exist. Whereas probably even 10 years ago, I couldn't be doing what I'm doing in the way that I do it.
Sure. And just to sort of reiterate, you mentioned that there's the C# scripts that you could throw in. Those are just, I'm going to use bunny quotes again, just. Those are for like altering the behaviors of certain things, right? It's not like, oh, I have to load up Visual Studio and write thousands upon thousands of lines of code because there's bits missing. It's more a case of, so when I want the character to move around, I want to give them when they pick up this particular item, I want to increase the gravity used, or I want to decrease the gravity, or maybe I want to make them flash different colors or something, right? Something that's outside of the initial remit of Unity itself.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, that's when you probably start getting into scripting, is when you want to change little things like that dynamically during runtime. And the great thing about the scripting language is it is as simple or as complex as you want. It could be as simple as, okay, I want to be able to change gravity at this certain gameplay segment whenever it's detected or something like that. That could be that is literally one line of code in Unity to do an operation like that. Or you can custom write modifications to how gravity is handled across the entire game, do a lot of the math yourself directly, like maybe you need certain custom math that's not handled natively through the system or something, or custom gravity, and you can end up writing a 1,000-line file to handle all those edge cases and everything too. It's literally, you're just writing as much scripting as you need to get done with what you're doing. You're not writing boilerplate. You're not wasting your time you're not wasting your time with just the initial setup or the prototyping or anything like that. It's just basically what you need to do is what you're writing the scripting for. And that's why it's so different from someone like me who comes from the days of all that boilerplate to get a Win32 application just to render a window back in like 99 or something, in 1999.
Oh, totally.
It's incredible.
Yep.
Yeah.
I remember using OpenGL and some library or other to sort of hook into with .NET 2. And it was like, okay, so you're going to create a new window and put about 15 nulls in there. Don't worry about that, because that's just because of how the Windows 32 API works.
Oh, it's so true. It's so true. And I mean, it's the I believe the current C# scripting engine in there is .NET. I think they're listed as 4.x. I think it's 4.5. I want to say. So they've put a lot of work in the last couple of years to bringing .NET up to more modernish standards inside Unity, and that's all just natively available to you alongside the APIs for the Unity engine. And the scripting language gives you hooks into really everything that you could do through the WYSIWYG editor in Unity. You can access the innards through the scripting language and make the per line modifications that you need for really anything. It's really, really great that way. And it's as much or as little control as you want to have.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Like you say, being able to sort of drop things in to increase or decrease, and as you say, as much or as little control as you want. That's great, because I feel like I say, I haven't used it, but from your description, it's very much like it's ready to go. Why are you not using it? Come and use it, Jamie. You're not using it fast enough. Just download Unity and get it done.
And that really is like a lot of it is just downloading and running it. By the way, I've noticed that this podcast has turned into an advertisement for Unity quite a bit. We've got to work at some product placement and get some
absolutely,
or something. but it's funny. I think that anybody listening to this probably would sound like that we are kind of really singing Unity's praises a lot here. But honestly, everything I've said so far is just the honest impressions I've had of it over the years I've been dealing with it. And look, I don't want to say that everything's perfect all the time in Unity. It's not that it's a magic place where everything runs great all the time and you won't run into problems and things won't crash and stuff like that. One of the biggest things that takes up my time in Unity is getting game performance to an acceptable level and using all the built-in tools and creating tools that are not built into Unity to get the frame rate up, to get the load times down, to handle memory management and things like that. I mean, you're in C#, you're using .NET 4.x, you've got a garbage collector. I'm not messing around with pointers and stuff and writing, C for this thing. But even though it's got that built-in stuff, you can't just go crazy. You have to be mindful of rendering batches. You have to be mindful of the amount of triangles being rendered on there. You have to be mindful about how, if you're writing scripts, that you're not introducing inefficiency in the scripts, that you're handling asynchronous functions properly. So I definitely don't want to get the impression that it's so foolproof you can't get into trouble. There is a lot of trouble you can get into, and as a developer producing commercial games, you're going to spend a tremendous amount of your time focused on tweaking things to get the performance where it needs to go. But at the same time, you're not spending that time writing boilerplate code to get a window up and running and get a triangle on the screen. And that's kind of the trade-off at the end of the day. Is it is a tool set that tries to be everything to everyone, and then when you figure out who you are, well, you're going to spend some time customizing it to your needs from a performance perspective, tailoring things to the platform that you're targeting. Not every platform has the same amount of memory. Not every platform has like an SSD, or some of them have old style, hard drives running at 5400 RPM or stuff like that. You will spend a lot of time working on those portions of your product. And that's not a failing to Unity. It's just a fact of life when you're developing software.
Yeah, I mean, you would have to spend time working on those same problems if you hand wrote all of the code anyway. It just
absolutely,
you get to that point faster, right?
Yes, you get to that point faster, and Unity does not do it for you. That's where you're putting in your thinking to get there, just like with anything else you're writing software for.
Sure. So with that said then, do you have any specific resources that you'd recommend if someone was going, hey, I'm a .NET dev, I want to make a 3D scene, Unity is the way I'm going to do it. How do I get started? Do you have any specific documentation or resources you'd recommend?
Yes, the place that I spend the most of my time is literally on the Unity website. They have videos for free, and a lot of this is for free. They have free videos, free tutorials, free getting started guides for when you're having your first day in Unity, and when you're on your 2000th day in Unity. They've got a full discussion forums that are very active, where engineers and folks building Unity games are asking each other questions on the non-proprietary parts of Unity, or the platforms that they're working on. And you can get a lot of help with basically anything on there. And I've asked questions on there. I've answered a lot of questions on there from folks. Ultimately, those are probably some of the greatest resources you will have. As anybody could expect, YouTube is a fantastic place. People do tutorial videos on Unity all over YouTube. Just Google for whatever you're trying to learn on there. Somebody did a video. The thing to keep in mind, though, is that obviously Unity is versioned. It has breaking changes. You may find a video from 5 years ago that literally just is not the same in Unity today. And you may just be kind of back from trying to figure it out from scratch. And that's just the one thing to be aware of. But there is a tremendous amount of documentation. And I believe they do offer paid services as well if you actually want to sit down with somebody who works at Unity and discuss your problem, and they can give you guidance as well. And I think it's part of their paid tiers and stuff like that to get classroom time and other things like that. So, I got to say that they've put in a lot of effort into building a community and building resources to answer almost any question I've come across,
Okay, that's pretty cool. I'll get some links to some of those parts and pepper them into the show notes. I guess. It's probably one of the best ways to do it, because if people are driving along, they don't want to be leaping across the dashboard to get a pen. Drive safe, folks. Drive safe.
Yeah. Honestly, it's with anything in our profession. Google it. Literally, usually the Unity resources that I'm referring to are going to be at the top of the list when you Google a problem in Unity. That's how I find solutions to any questions or problems I have. And I encourage folks, they learn about Unity, to contribute back to those communities, because a lot of what's keeping everybody going is just folks talking to each other and sharing their insights and stuff like that.
Sure, that sounds great. Yeah, so definitely, don't do that while you're driving, folks. But when you get to your desk, do a bit of a Google. Let's all see if we can get Unity Development 101 up to the top of the Google ranking for when this episode drops. Right? Well, maybe we can do that. I don't know.
It is so funny to have basically the question come down. It's like, how do you figure this out? Just Google it. You'll be fine. Just Google it. It's like, But honestly, it's the truth in this case, that they've done, their resources are good, and it's because they're good, they're at the top of the search results because people are using them. It's there.
So let's say I'm that fictional .NET developer. I've picked up Unity. I've created something. It's my magnum opus, and I'm ready to publish it to all of the different spaces, right? I know from our previous discussion when you were on Waffling Tailors, which is the other show that I do, that you're sort of pivoting a little bit into that, helping people to publish titles to the different formats. So can you talk a little bit about that? What do I just give you a call and say, hey, Evan, I want to publish this on my PlayStation 5. Do it, and I'll give you my credit card number. Is that what I do?
Please don't send me credit card numbers. I think it's where I want to start. Is do not send your financial information to me. But seriously, if you are working on a Unity project, or maybe you're even getting started, and you have questions, or you want some guidance, or you want some help, or you have a fully fleshed out product that you've released it on Steam, and you're like, hey, this would be awesome on PS5 or Nintendo Switch or something. That go to my website, deaddroppublishing.com. There's a form on there where you can give me a quick rundown of what you're working on and what your needs are and the services that I offer there. And basically, I'm prepared to help out with everything along the entire development pipeline. Everything from planning your project, planning your costs. I have a very deep personal professional history in product management and project management as part of my career as a software engineer. And I'm able to help you plan out your projects, plan out your timelines, plan out your costs. When it comes to building and porting work for your game, you can hit me up for that kind of stuff, and we can discuss, what's going to need to go into porting your game to PlayStation or Xbox or a console platform or PC or something like that. I can talk about being your publisher as well for digital storefronts, and handle a lot of the process of working with those companies, reaching out and basically acting as your publisher to get them onto those platforms. And all the way up through going through cert, going through release, and post release product management. Those are all things that I'm extremely experienced in. I've shipped 6 games on virtually every console platform that's out right now in Steam. And I've done it all. I've seen it all. I've run into every problem you can possibly run into. And I'm, able to help you out with getting to know these companies, working with them, publishing your products, and getting everything across the finish line for you. So, go to deaddroppublishing.com. There's a forum on there. You can read about my games. You can read about the services. Send me your information. Don't just send me financial information. That's not gonna help anybody. And basically, we'll take it from there and talk about it and make a plan. And that's as simple as it is.
I like that because there's a lot more involved. I see a lot of, especially the 1 or 2 person indie developer teams where they're like, well, we released it on PS4 and nobody bought it. And I'm like, well, there's a little bit more involved than just push the release button, You kind of have to do the marketing do.
Yes, and it's everything. It's not like, and the thing to be clear about is porting your game, and I actually have this up, I think, on the front page of the website, is porting your game is not just about writing code. It's about the business relationships. It's about setting up your marketing, planning for your release, staging your release, getting folks to notice it and work on it. Endless Nightmares, my latest title, was the biggest success for me in the series. I did a worldwide simultaneous launch on virtually every platform I could possibly release on. We did a lot of marketing. We did marketing through the platform holders directly on PlayStation. You can see the trailer on the PlayStation's YouTube. I've written PlayStation blog posts, tons of them. I've written Xbox wire posts. I need Xbox to play through the game. I had marketing done through general gaming press and things like that. That's the kind of stuff you have to do to really get the word out there and to find the financial success you're looking at. Because the worst thing to do is to invest a ton of money, release your game, nobody buys it, and then nobody knows about it, nobody buys it, and you're just sitting there like, well, okay, I'm out of business now. So it's that whole pipeline, and that's kind of where I want to keep moving towards with people, is helping them to understand what that whole pipeline looks like and helping them to get their products out there. And something that it's not an understatement to say that I've invested years, over 6 years now, of my life into learning these processes for all these different platforms, learning the ins and outs, building the relationships, understanding all the pitfalls and stuff like that. For somebody starting out today who's only published on Steam and wants to publish on a console, that could literally be a year or 2 of work for you to get up and going. I could cut that down to months for you, and a few months, not many months. And I mean, it's that it's an orders of magnitude of saving your time, saving your money, saving everything else, and actually getting it out there.
Awesome. So would you mind then, in our final few minutes together, because I know we're both busy people, you need to brush off and do some stuff.
Yeah.
Would you mind giving the folks who are listening ways to get in contact with you and another really quick sort of brief overview of the Outbreak series that you've produced?
Sure. So again, for anybody tuning in at the end here, my name is Evan Wolbach. I'm very easy to find on the internet. You can hit me up at deaddroppublishing.com or deaddropstudios.com. My Twitter is at deaddropstudios or at Ev Wolbach, which is EVWOL, B as in boy, ACH. And if you go to any of those places, my contact information, the services we offer, the games that my studio produces and is developing, and news on everything that's happening, you can find it all readily up there. Links to all the store pages on there. And very cool, in the last couple of months, we've started publishing physical versions of the games with limited run games, and they're awesome folks. I've been spending a lot of time working with limited run, and that whole team over there is absolutely phenomenal. The stuff that they're doing for indie devs is incredible. And we had our first release of the Outbreak Collection on PS4 as a physical PS4 disc for the first 5 games in the series back in July. I think the orders ended in August, and you're going to see it probably popping up at stores and stuff probably towards the end of this calendar year, if not early next year. I don't think there's a date for that yet, but it's really cool. We're even getting the games are becoming physical, which is exciting, and it's been wonderful to see the success there. The Outbreak series is a series of survival horror titles that I've developed. They are designed to both look and play very similar to survival horror from the late 90s and early 2000s. There's 6 games in the series right now. Everything from overhead 2D to fixed camera 3D to over-the-shoulder 3D. And with Endless Nightmares now, You can choose between fixed camera, over the shoulder, or even a first-person shooter view. Play the entire game in that. The series is designed to kind of look like a PS2, PS3 game brought into the modern age. Give you all that tense inventory management. Give you all that crushing difficulty, fighting off the undead. A lot of the games offer co-op play that you can bring your friends along. And there's everything from roguelikes to narrative adventures to shooters to everything that you could think of in the survival horror genre. And the series has just been picking up steam nonstop for the last couple of years. And 2022 is going to be the biggest year for the series to date in so many ways. There's so much stuff I want to talk about, but I just can't right now. But you're going to be hearing a lot about Outbreak starting in early 2022. And through that entire year, I have just some really incredible stuff planned and scheduled. And, where the series is going. And the thing that's cool is I've been working on this series 6-7 years now. It's since when I really started on it. And it's finally starting to become what I envisioned in my head, whereas iteratively the production values increased, the quality's increased, the gameplay's become deeper, that we have mocapped animations, and when you see the updates for Endless Nightmares that I've already shared publicly, it's going to get some major content updates in the next couple of months, and where you see where the series is going next in the next game, it's going to be really just a lot of kind of what I always envisioned back then when I started, finally becoming real and finally getting that narrative. And I don't want to spoil anything, but it's if you look at kind of like Endless Nightmares, you're going to say, hey, there's still a couple things missing from this that would seem pretty obvious if I were to go back and play an old Resident Evil game. And that stuff's finally coming into place, and it's just so exciting. So I know that's kind of a lot of information at once, but go buy the Outbreak series. It's available on every platform you could possibly buy. DeadDropStudios.com, DeadDropPublishing.com. Hit me up on Twitter, DeadDrop Studios on Twitter. Yeah, it's never been a cooler time to be an indie dev, and I feel incredibly fortunate to be in a position where I'm able to do this as a full-time career. It's really incredible.
Awesome.
And I'm sorry, I'm just going to cut you off. I want to make sure. I want to thank ID at Xbox, Microsoft, PlayStation, Limited Run, Nintendo, Valve, everybody, because those companies and those folks, especially the folks at Limited Run, Doug and Josh and their entire team, my success is because of the opportunities that these companies gave me and the faith that they put in my work and everything else. And I would not be doing what I'm doing today without their support. And I just want to say across the board, these companies are phenomenal. And if you are an independent game developer, reach out to these folks. They're wonderful to work with. They're working on exciting stuff. And, it's never been more approachable to work in their ecosystems. And they're awesome. Everyone's awesome.
Awesome. What I'd like to say, Evan, is thank you ever so much for being on the show. We'll put all of the links into the show notes. And one parting shot is that Squidge, my co-host for Waffling Tales, absolutely loves playing Outbreak Endless Nightmares. So, he's had a lot of fun.
Thanks. I'm so happy to hear that. And I got to say, if he likes that, I think he's gonna really like where things are going.
Cool. I'll tell him to keep an eye on it.
Yep. Thank you so much for having me on. This was awesome.
No worries, Evan. No worries. Thank you ever so much.
All right. Thank you.
Wrapping up. That was my interview with Evan Wolbach on Unity, how easy it is to get started with it, and some of the many different types of applications that can be built with it. Be sure to check out the show notes for a bunch of links to some of the stuff that we covered and a full transcription of the interview. The show notes, as always, can be found at .netco.show, and there will be a link directly to them in your podcatcher. And don't forget to spread the word. Leave a rating or review on your podcatcher of choice. Head over to .netco.show/subscribe for ways to do that, or reach out via our contact page. That's at .netco.show/contact. And to come back next time for more .NET goodness. I'll see you again real soon. See you later, folks.